The cold metal bars of the cage rattled as the ship moved through space. The human inside sat silently, his arms resting on his knees, his breathing slow and steady. His captors, tall, scaled aliens with sharp ridges along their spines, spoke in their own language, their laughter echoing through the dimly lit cargo hold. To them, he was nothing more than an animal, a lesser being, a prize taken from a distant jungle world. The Tylari were one of the most feared species in the galaxy, known for their brutal empire and their conquest of weaker races. When their scout ship had landed on the remote, untamed planet, they had expected to find only wild beasts. Instead, they have found him. A lone human living off the land, surviving in a place where even the strongest creatures fell prey to the unforgiving wilderness. They had taken him easily. At least, that's what they believed. A stun blast, heavy restraints, and the job was done. But none of them had noticed the way he had let them take him. None of them had realized that, even while unconscious, his hands had instinctively memorized the weight of their weapons, his ears had recorded the sound of their language, and his mind had mapped out every weakness in their armor. Now, inside the cage, he listened. He learned. One of the Xylari guards stepped closer to the bars, smirking as he banged the metal with the butt of his weapon. "Pathetic creature," he said in a deep, guttural voice. "Not so tough now, are you?" The others laughed. One of them, a larger Xylari with golden armor, tilted his head, studying the human. "Strange-looking thing," he muttered. "Too soft, too weak." His eyes narrowed as he noticed something on the human's exposed arms and chest. Scars. Dozens of them. Some old and faded, others fresh and deep. The Tylari were warriors. They understood scars. To them, scars were proof of battles survived, of enemies slain. But this human, he had more than any Xylari warrior they had ever seen. Golden armor scoffed. A beast with battle wounds. Interesting. He tapped the control panel, and the cage's energy barrier lowered slightly. "Let's see if it fights like one." One of the guards sneered, stepping forward with his shock baton. The weapon crackled with energy as he jabbed it toward the human. But the moment it entered the cage, everything changed. The human moved. Fast, too fast. Before the Xylari could react, the baton was ripped from his hand. In the same motion, the human grabbed his wrist and twisted, the sickening crunch of broken bones filling the air. The Xylari screamed, stumbling back. The laughter died instantly. Golden Armor's eyes widened in shock. The other guards raised their weapons, but the human didn't attack further. He simply tossed the baton aside and stepped back into the shadows of the cage, his expression unreadable. The injured Tylari clutched his arm, panting. It's a demon," he stammered. "No, it's worse than that." Golden Armor's gaze stayed locked on the human, a strange feeling creeping into his chest. Fear. He had thought this was just another mindless beast, an animal to be broken and used. But now, he wasn't so sure. The ship docked at the Tylari capital, a massive fortress world surrounded by towering spires and thick warships. The human was dragged from the cage, shackled with heavy restraints, and marched through the city streets. Alien citizens stopped to watch, whispering among themselves. Many of them had never seen a human before. "To the pits with it," one of the guards muttered. The gladiatorial arena. That was where all strong captives were sent, forced to fight for the entertainment of the Empire. If the human was truly just a wild animal, the arena would prove it. As they reached the entrance of the colossal arena, Golden Armor turned to him. "You should have stayed in your jungle, human," he said. "Now, you'll die here." The human smiled. Golden Armor frowned. "Why do you smile?" The human looked up at the blood-stained gates of the arena, then back at his captor. His voice was low and calm. "You think I haven't done this before?" The gates opened, and the crowd roared. The gates slammed shut behind him as the human stepped into the arena. The ground beneath his bare feet was rough and stained with the blood of countless battles. Around him, the stadium was filled with thousands of alien spectators, their voices merging into a deafening roar. Towering above the pit, in a private viewing box, sat the Tylari warlords, leaders of the Empire, eager to witness the latest spectacle. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, speaking in the Tylari tongue, introducing their latest beast for the slaughter. The human stood still, his expression unreadable, his body relaxed. But his eyes moved constantly, analyzing everything: the size of the pit, the position of the guards, the weight of the chains on his wrists. He had been in situations like this before. This was not the first time someone had thrown him into a fight expecting him to die. A massive gate on the other side of the arena rumbled open. From the darkness emerged a creature unlike anything he had seen before. It was enormous, at least 3 times his size, covered in thick, bone-like armor. 4 glowing red eyes locked onto him, and rows of jagged teeth dripped with saliva. The crowd erupted in cheers as the beast let out a guttural roar, slamming its clawed fists into the ground, making the entire arena tremble. Golden Armor watched from the stands, a smirk on his face. "Let's see how long the human lasts," he muttered to the warlord beside him. "The Gultar has never lost a fight." The beast lunged. The human moved. Chains still wrapped around his wrists, he twisted his body just in time, barely avoiding the crushing weight of the monster's strike. Dust exploded into the air as the beast's claws carved deep trenches into the ground. The human rolled away, fluid and fast, his mind already calculating. The creature was powerful, but slow. Its armor was thick, but there had to be weaknesses: joints, the throat, the eyes. The beast roared again, swinging wildly. This time, the human ducked beneath the attack and struck with precision. His foot slammed into the back of the creature's knee, hitting a soft spot. The Gultar stumbled, surprised by the sudden pain. The audience gasped. No one had ever heard it before. Golden Armor leaned forward, his smirk fading. This wasn't right. The human was supposed to run, to cower, to die. But instead, he was fighting back. And worse, he was winning. The Gultar attacked in a frenzy now, in rage. The human weaved between its strikes, his movements calculated, effortless. Each time the beast exposed a weak point, he struck, fast, precise, and deadly. He used the chains on his wrists as weapons, wrapping them around the creature's throat, pulling tight. The monster thrashed, its claws reaching for him, but it was too late. The human twisted with all his strength. There was a sickening snap. Silence fell over the arena. The massive beast collapsed, its body twitching once before going completely still. For several seconds, no one moved. No one spoke. The crowd, the warlords, even the guards, stunned into silence. And then the human straightened, breathing heavily, his body covered in sweat and dust. He turned his head and looked up, not at the crowd, not at the guards, but directly at Golden Armor. Golden Armor felt something he had never felt before: dread. Because the human's gaze was not one of a man who had won by luck. It was the gaze of a predator, a hunter who had just tested his prey. And now, the prey knew it was being hunted. The silence in the arena did not last long. A roar of disbelief and outrage erupted from the crowd. The Tylari warlords exchanged uneasy glances. The Gultar was their strongest gladiator, a beast that had crushed warriors from 100 different species. Yet the human had killed it with his bare hands. Golden Armor clenched his jaw. This was not how the spectacle was supposed to go. The human was meant to be an example, a reminder of why resistance against the Tylari Empire was futile. But now, instead of fear, murmurs of something dangerous rippled through the crowd. Curiosity, respect, even admiration. The guards stormed into the arena, weapons raised, surrounding the human. He did not resist as they grabbed him, forcing him to his knees. His muscles were tense, but his expression remained calm. too calm. Golden Armor did not like it. He expected the human to be exhausted, broken by the fight, but instead, he knelt with the same deadly stillness as before. Golden Armor rose from his seat, stepping to the edge of his viewing box. "This fight is not over," he announced. His voice carried across the arena, silencing the crowd. "This creature is nothing more than a savage who got lucky. Let's see if he can survive against something far worse." The crowd cheered, though many had begun to glance at the human differently. The gates opened again. Another challenger. This time, it was not a beast. It was a warrior. A auxiliary champion, towering over the human, covered in sleek black armor. He carried a plasma spear, its energy humming with deadly power. The human's hands were still chained. His body still bore the marks of his previous fights, but he smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that made the champion hesitate. Golden Armor stiffened. What did this human know that they didn't? The auxiliary champion attacked without warning, the plasma spear striking down toward the human's chest. But the human twisted at the last second, letting the spear skim past him. In one fluid motion, he grabbed the spear with his chains and pulled. The crowd gasped. The auxiliary champion staggered forward, caught off balance, and in that moment, the human acted. He drove his elbow into the champion's exposed throat, a perfect strike that sent him crashing to the ground. Before he could recover, the human wrapped his chains around the spear and yanked. The plasma blade cut through the auxiliary's armor like butter. Golden Armor felt a chill crawl up his spine. The human had no weapons, no armor. His hands were bound. And still, he fought like a soldier who had spent his life in war. Blood pooled beneath the fallen champion. The human stood once more. His chest rose and fell with slow, controlled breaths. He lifted his gaze, scanning the crowd, not as prey, but as a predator. This was no savage. This was a warrior. And he was studying his captors. Golden Armor clenched his fists as silence fell over the arena once more. This was not how the spectacle was supposed to go. The human had defeated their champion, and now, instead of terror, the crowd watched with something dangerous in their eyes. Respect. The guards hesitated before stepping forward. They raised their shock batons, ready to subdue the human, but the way he stared at them made them pause. His body was covered in wounds, his hands still bound by heavy chains, and yet he stood like a man who had already won. Golden Armor's voice rang out, sharp and angry. "Restrain him." The guards moved in. The human let them. He did not resist as they locked a new set of restraints around his wrists and ankles, tightening them until the metal bit into his skin. But even then, his expression remained the same. Unbothered, unafraid. Golden Armor turned to one of his advisors. "Find out who he was before we captured him." His tone was low, dangerous. "This is no ordinary human." The advisor bowed and rushed away. The human was dragged back through the gates, deeper into the heart of the Colosseum. The walls here were dark, cold, lined with the scars of countless battles fought in the arena. Other prisoners glanced at him as he passed, some with pity, some with fear. The guards shoved him into a cell and locked the door. The human didn't move. He simply watched them, studied them, as if memorizing their every movement. One of the guards, a younger auxiliary, sneered. "You think you're something special, human. You're just another toy for the arena. Tomorrow, we'll see if you can survive again." The human finally spoke. His voice was calm, steady. "I'm not the one who should be worried." The guard hesitated, his mandibles clicking together. Something about the way the human said it sent a chill through the air. They left him alone in the dark. Hours passed, maybe more. The human sat with his back against the cold metal wall, his breath slow and even. The arena had been a test, a way to measure him, to see if he would break. He didn't. He had learned something important today. They underestimated him. And that was their biggest mistake. "You said." Golden Armor paced in his chamber, his claws tapping against the polished stone floor. He had overestimated the power of the arena and underestimated the human. That mistake could not happen again. He had ordered the records to be searched, determined to find out who this creature truly was. A soft chime echoed through the room. His advisor returned, carrying a datapad with a nervous expression. "My lord, we have the records." Golden Armor snatched the device, scanning the information. His mandibles twitched. The human's name was there, along with his military history. But what caught his eye was something far more disturbing. The scars. The patterns etched into the human skin weren't from random battles. They were a tally, a record of every kill, every victory. Some warriors did this, marking their bodies as proof of their strength. But this was different. The number was too high, too precise. This is impossible," Golden Armor whispered. The human had fought in wars against species stronger than the Xylari. He had been a survivor of a massacre, one the Xylari themselves had played a part in. And yet, he was still here. Golden Armor's grip tightened on the datapad. The human wasn't just a warrior. He was something far worse. A ghost. A legend. A nightmare. In the prison cell, the human sat still, his head tilted slightly as he listened. He could hear the distant footsteps, the voices of guards exchanging words. They had finally figured it out. He flexed his fingers. The restraints were tight, but not unbreakable. He had studied the guards, their patterns, their weapons, and now it was only a matter of time. They thought he was just another fighter. They were wrong. "You said." Golden Armor stood in the war chamber, his advisors gathered around him. The tension in the air was suffocating. The human, no, the hunter, was more than they had imagined. The records told a terrifying story, but what worried Golden Armor most was the calm look in the human's eyes, even when he was captured. That was not the look of a defeated man. It was the look of a predator waiting for his chance. One of his generals stepped forward. "My lord, if this human truly is who the records say he is, we have made a grave mistake." Golden Armor's mandibles twitched. "We already made that mistake when we threw him into the arena." He turned to another officer. "The restraints, are they secure?" The officer hesitated. Too long. Golden Armor's stomach sank. At that moment, the alarm screamed through the fortress. The chamber's doors burst open as a wounded guard stumbled in, clutching his chest. His breathing was ragged, his armor soaked in blood. He's free," the guard gasped before collapsing. Golden Armor froze. The human was loose. In the lower halls of the fortress, shadows danced along the walls as the emergency lights flickered. The human moved like a wraith, silent, efficient, unstoppable. He had taken down 5 guards already, each one barely having time to react before he disappeared into the darkness once more. They had studied him. But what they didn't understand was that he had studied them too. A pair of Xylari warriors stood at the next hallway, weapons raised. "Stay alert," one whispered. A hand darted out of the shadows. The first guard barely had time to react before something tightened around his throat. His vision blurred, and before he could fire his weapon, the world went black. The second guard turned, firing wildly, but there was nothing. Just empty space where his partner had been. Then, a whisper in his ear. "Your turn." Pain exploded in his skull. Then silence. The human stepped over the unconscious bodies, picking up one of their weapons. He checked the energy level. Full charge. He smirked. "Now, the real hunt begins." Golden Armor stood at the fortress control room, his mandibles clicking in frustration. How had one human, one prisoner, managed to tear through an entire battalion of his best warriors? The security feeds showed the carnage. Unconscious bodies, crushed weapons, lights flickering where power lines had been cut. The human was a ghost. Golden Armor turned to his generals. "Where is he now?" A technician's claws trembled over the controls. He's heading for the armory, my lord. Golden Armor's blood ran cold. The armory. If he gets to the armory, we won't be hunting him. He'll be hunting us. Down in the fortress depths, the human moved swiftly. His body was bruised, his breathing sharp, but his eyes burned with purpose. He had spent his entire life in war. He had been trained to escape, to adapt, to survive. His captors had made one crucial mistake. They underestimated him. He reached the armory doors and scanned the controls. Heavy security, reinforced steel, but they had Xylari weapons inside, explosives, plasma rifles, armor. And he had stolen an access code. With a few quick taps, the doors slid open. The room beyond was a treasure trove of destruction. The human wasted no time, grabbing a plasma rifle, strapping on armor plates, and loading himself with grenades. Then he turned to the security camera watching him. He stared directly into it, unblinking. And then he smiled. Golden Armor slammed his fist onto the control panel. The screen flickered, but the image was burned into his mind. That look, that expression. This wasn't a prisoner trying to escape. This was a warrior preparing for war. A siren blared across the fortress. A captain ran into the control room, gasping, "My lord, we have a problem." Golden Armor turned, rage boiling in his chest. "You think I don't know that already?" The captain swallowed hard. The human. He's activated the base's self-destruct sequence. For a moment, silence. Then, a deep, paralyzing fear settled in. Golden Armor turned back to the screen, watching the human march toward the exit, fully armed. He had not just underestimated him. He had doomed them all. Search, reason,